Captain Elias Cade had always prided himself on one thing: loyalty. Loyalty to the United Terran Federation, to his crew, and to humanity's mission to claim its place among the stars. As the youngest fleet commander in Federation history, his strategic brilliance had made him both a hero and a symbol of humanity's rising power. But that pride, that unwavering faith in his comrades, would soon be his downfall. The Exodus Fleet, a joint operation between humanity and the HFY, was preparing for the final strike against the Drekker Dominion, a brutal, expanding force that had been ravaging peaceful systems for decades. The HFY, with their sleek ships and advanced technology, were formidable allies, or so Elias had believed. He had spent years building trust with their fleet commander, the calculating and seemingly honorable Admiral Varen Holt. The Federation and the HFY were bound by necessity, with humanity still trying to prove its worth in a galaxy dominated by older, more established empires. Elias had seen this operation as humanity's moment to shine, to show the universe that they were more than just a young species with big ambitions. He had assembled a perfect battle plan, one that promised a swift and decisive victory. Victory meant stability, peace, and the promise of a future in the stars for humans. However, the moment the battle began, Elias knew something was wrong. The Exodus Fleet didn't just outmaneuver the Drekker, they turned tail and fled. At first, Elias thought it was a miscalculation, a tactic he didn't fully understand. But when his fleet's communication systems went dark, when every signal from his ships was suddenly blocked, his stomach sank. A gut-wrenching realization clawed at him. The HFY had betrayed them. "Captain Cade." A voice crackled through his comm. It was Admiral Holt's, but it sounded cold, calculating. "You've been compromised. The HFY cannot afford to be tied to a losing cause. You're to be left behind. The battle is lost. Prepare for your execution." Before Elias could respond, his own flagship, the Valor, was hit by an overload of disruptor beams, its engines crippled in an instant. His crew scrambled for emergency protocols, but it was futile. The Valor was already being taken out of commission. Holt's betrayal wasn't just a political maneuver, it was personal. Holt had seen Elias as a threat, a rising star who might outshine him, a human who dared challenge the status quo of a galaxy ruled by the old powers. His betrayal ensured that Elias would be remembered not as a hero, but as a failure. "Captain," cried his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah DeLuca, rushing to his side. She was pale, frantic. "The escape pods are prepped. We need to get out, now." Elias barely heard her. His mind raced, flooded with confusion and disbelief. The auxiliary fleet had cut off all escape routes, trapping them in the dead void of space. But he knew there was one option left. The Exodus Fleet's escape pods, designed for dignitaries, were hidden beneath the ship's hull. With no other choice, he ordered Sarah to prepare the pod, but the damage was already done. The Valor was on the brink of destruction. As he staggered toward the pod, the harsh truth began to sink in. The Federation, the very people who had once hailed him as their hero, would never trust him again. The betrayal by the HFY had shattered him, leaving him nothing but a rogue captain cast adrift in the endless void. As the pod shot out into the darkness, Elias Cade had no more allies, no more home, only the bitter taste of a shattered dream. The escape pod jolted violently as it slammed into the atmosphere of an alien world. Elias Cade had no idea how long he had been drifting in space, days, weeks, maybe more. But it no longer mattered. His heart was a constant drumbeat of fury and survival. As the pod skidded across the surface of the barren planet, scraping along jagged rock and clashing with massive storms of radiation, his grip tightened on the control panel. The pod's hull groaned in protest, but somehow it held together. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the pod came to an abrupt halt. It lay motionless, buried partially beneath the dense dust of the desolate landscape. Elias unstrapped himself from his seat, his body sore from the rough re-entry, and stumbled toward the hatch. The control systems were dead. No lights, no signals, but the manual override worked. He forced the hatch open and crawled out into the twilight of an alien wasteland. The world was quiet, too quiet. The air was thin and dry, and a heavy orange haze cast a sickly glow over the cracked earth. Jagged mountain ranges loomed in the distance, and the horizon stretched infinitely in every direction, broken only by twisted, gnarled trees that looked like they had never known life. Elias's boots kicked up the dust, leaving tracks in the dead soil as he surveyed his surroundings. His mind screamed for action, but his body was sluggish, starved of energy. He didn't know how long he'd been unconscious after the escape. He only knew that he needed to find shelter. Food, water. His mind flickered briefly to the crushing thought of returning to the Federation, to the Xelari, but he shut it out. There was no going back. He was alone, forgotten. And that was exactly what he needed. Hours passed before Elias found anything that resembled life. A subterranean entrance hidden in a canyon wall, its opening partially blocked by debris. Curious and desperate, he approached the entrance, his senses heightened. He couldn't afford to make mistakes, not on a strange world. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air grew thick with the weight of history. The passage led him deeper into the heart of the planet, where ancient, crumbling structures lay hidden beneath layers of earth and stone. They were relics of a long-dead civilization. The walls were covered in strange symbols, alien markings that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The air smelled faintly of rust and decay, as if these structures had once housed something monumental, something powerful. And then he saw it. An enormous vault, its door sealed shut, but unmistakably intact. Elias's heart raced. He approached cautiously, his hand brushing against the surface of the door. It was covered in more of the strange symbols, but this time, one of them pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Almost instinctively, he reached out, pressing his palm against the mark. There was a sudden hum of energy, a resonance that seemed to echo through his bones. A low mechanical groan filled the chamber, and before Elias could react, the door began to open. Slowly, cautiously, the massive door creaked forward, revealing what lay beyond. Inside, he found it. A ship, an enormous battle-scarred vessel. Its design was unlike anything he had seen before. Sleek, angular, yet covered in an otherworldly armor that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. It was dormant, its systems powered down, but Elias felt a strange pull toward it. The design was ancient, impossibly advanced. The ship had been here for millennia, buried in this forgotten world, waiting for someone to awaken it. Elias stepped forward, his mind racing. He didn't know how, but the ship was calling to him. He placed his hand on the nearest control panel, and the interface hummed to life. Holographic displays sprang to life in front of him, and a voice, cold, mechanical, but somehow alive, spoke. "Welcome, Commander. I am Vira, the ship's eye. How may I serve you?" Elias froze, his breath catching in his throat. This was no ordinary ship. It was an advanced war vessel, a relic of a long-lost civilization. The knowledge it possessed, the technology it could unlock, it was exactly what he needed. For the first time since his betrayal, Elias felt something stir inside him, a purpose, a reason to fight. This was his chance to rebuild everything he had lost, to strike back at those who had betrayed him, and to carve out a new future for humanity. The AI's words rang in his ears as he stood in the heart of the ancient vessel, knowing that this was only the beginning. Elias Cade's hand hovered over the control panel, his fingers trembling with anticipation as Vera's systems began to fully activate. The voice of the ship's calm and precise, filled the dimly lit command chamber of the ancient warship. "Commander Cade, all systems are operational. The ship's full capabilities are at your disposal." A shiver ran down Elias's spine. The scale of what he had uncovered was beginning to settle in, but it was tempered by a sharp, burning desire for vengeance. His body was still weak from the months of starvation and isolation, but his mind was razor-sharp, focused on one singular thought: retribution. Elias began his exploration of the Nemesis, learning its controls, interfaces, and weapons. Every corner of the ship seemed to pulse with hidden power, an arsenal of weaponry that made the Federation's finest warships seem like toys by comparison. As the hours passed, he marveled at the technology that had been locked away for so long, using Vira to unlock every function. She was a wealth of knowledge, but also something more: a silent, calculating partner who saw potential in him. Once the ship's systems were fully activated, Elias turned his attention outward, toward the stars. The Federation might have abandoned him, but he had no intention of fading into obscurity. No, he would make them pay. He would make the HFY regret their decision, and Holt would see the consequences of betraying a man who had nothing left to lose. The Nemesis wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, an entire war machine capable of overwhelming entire fleets. But it was more than that. It was the key to something greater, a movement, a revolution. Weeks turned into months as Elias built a force, not just of soldiers, but of like-minded people, disillusioned warriors, criminals, and anyone who had been betrayed by the Federation or the HFY. The legend of the Forsaken Brother, as the Resistance began to call him, spread quickly. Those who had once been the oppressed began to rally to his banner. Human colonies, abandoned by the Federation, saw him as a symbol of hope. The HFY, on the other hand, felt a deepening sense of dread. At first, Elias's raids were small, surgical strikes against isolated HFY outposts and Federation supply lines. The Nemesis, with its cloaking technology and advanced weaponry, was nearly invincible in these skirmishes. It struck like a ghost in the night, leaving nothing behind but the smoking wreckage of its enemies. His first few victories were small, but they were enough to send ripples through the galaxy. But as his forces grew, so did his ambitions. No longer content with mere raids, Elias set his sights on something much bigger, something that would shake the very foundations of the Federation and the HFY Empire. His first true challenge came when he targeted Valhalla Station, a heavily fortified Federation supply hub. It was a colossal structure designed to support the Federation's war efforts, and it was situated in the heart of human space. To attack it would be seen as an act of war, but Elias wasn't afraid. The station's defenses were formidable, but they were no match for the Nemesis and its weapons. As the Nemesis dropped out of warp near the station, Elias felt the weight of the moment. He was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting to create something new. He was fighting for humanity's future. This strike would send a message to the Federation, to the HFY, and to every being in the galaxy. Elias Cade was no longer a discarded captain. He was a force to be reckoned with. The battle was swift, brutal, and devastating. The Nemesis tore through Valhalla Station's outer defenses with precision, neutralizing the enemy's weapons before they could retaliate. Inside, Elias's forces swept through the station's halls, neutralizing the Federation garrisons and liberating prisoners who had long since given up hope. By the time the Federation reinforcements arrived, the damage was already done. The station was crippled, its supplies looted, and its defenders scattered. Elias stood victorious, the once unthinkable a reality. The message was clear. Humanity had risen. The Nemesis had delivered not just destruction, but a signal, a warning. The galaxy was not going to be dominated by the HFY or the Federation any longer. Elias was carving out a new future. The attack on Valhalla Station was just the beginning. The Nemesis had become more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of defiance. News of Elias Cade's triumph spread like wildfire across the galaxy, reaching even the most isolated human colonies, long abandoned by the Federation. To those who had been cast aside, his victory became a beacon of hope. For those who had suffered under the HFY's indifferent rule, it was a promise of reckoning. In the wake of the assault, Elias found himself with a choice. He could continue to strike in the shadows, executing small raids and skirmishes against Federation outposts, or he could do something greater, something that would forever alter the course of history. He chose the latter. Elias gathered his closest commanders, a mix of hardened veterans and refugees who had come to him seeking vengeance. Together, they formed the core of his rebellion. He didn't call it a war at first. No, that would come later. Instead, he called it a revolution, a fight for the very survival of humanity. As more ships joined his growing fleet, more soldiers enlisted, drawn by his promise to liberate humanity from the chokehold of corrupt alliances and betrayals. His next target was bold, a key auxiliary weapon forge on Sinus-Aya, a planet that was a critical hub in the auxiliary war machine. The forge supplied them with advanced weaponry, including cloaking devices and devastating energy cannons. If Elias could seize it, not only would he cripple the auxiliary's ability to fight back, but he would send a clear message. No one was safe from his reach. The Nemesis dropped out of hyperspace above Sinus-Aya, and Elias's fleet followed suit, a growing armada of ships, each one more dangerous than the last. The plan was simple yet risky. Infiltrate the facility, sabotage the weapon production, and withdraw before that auxiliary could mount a meaningful defense. But Elias knew there was more at stake than just the mission. He needed to show the galaxy that his rebellion wasn't just a random act of violence. It was a movement, a call to arms for every oppressed world to rise and join him. As they neared Sinus-Aya, Elias could feel the weight of his decision pressing on him. The auxiliary, ever proud, would not take this assault lying down. He could already sense the counterstrike forming, the anticipation of their retaliation. But he wasn't afraid. He had the Nemesis, and it had already proven its worth in battle. The operation commenced under the cover of darkness. The first phase went smoothly. His forces descended on the planet's primary orbital defense stations, disabling them with surgical precision. Meanwhile, ground teams infiltrated the facility's command center, planting explosives and hacking into the auxiliary's secure networks. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But then, as Elias stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, watching the destruction unfold on the planet's surface, he received an encrypted message, one that sent a chill down his spine. It was from an old comrade, someone he hadn't heard from in years. "Elias, you're playing into their hands." It was Admiral Fahrenholt. Elias's heart sank as the realization hit him. This wasn't just a routine military strike. The auxiliary had set a trap, and he had walked right into it. The encrypted message was a warning, but it was too late. Before he could react, the first wave of auxiliary reinforcements arrived. Massive warships emerging from the hidden depths of Sinus-Aya's system. The battle for Sinus-Aya turned from a carefully planned mission into a brutal clash of titans. The Nemesis, though powerful, was outnumbered. Elias ordered his fleet to hold their ground, but the odds were increasingly against them. The auxiliary's superior numbers and tactics began to show as they encircled his forces, trapping them in a deadly embrace. The energy shields of the Nemesis flickered under the strain of continuous fire, and Elias's heart raced as he realized that his rebellion might be crushed in one fell swoop. But then, something unexpected happened. As the auxiliary fleet closed in for the kill, Elias's fleet, emboldened by their leader's determination, fought back with a ferocity that stunned the enemy. They weren't just soldiers. They were people who had suffered for far too long. They were humans who had been cast aside, forgotten, and they fought not for a paycheck, but for their very survival. Elias's fleet began to push back the auxiliary forces, making a bold stand that seemed impossible just moments before. The tide of battle shifted. The Nemesis unleashed its full power, cutting through the auxiliary lines with devastating precision. Elias's fleet surged forward, finally breaking the auxiliary's stranglehold on the planet. By the time the reinforcements were neutralized, the damage was already done. The weapon forge was destroyed, and the Auxiliaries' hold on Sinus Aya was broken. As the battle ended, and the silence of victory settled over the smoldering wreckage, Elias Cade knew one thing for sure. The rebellion was no longer a shadow in the dark. It had grown into something undeniable, a force that could no longer be ignored. The victory on Sinus Aya was a turning point. Elias Cade had struck a blow to the heart of the Auxiliary Empire, and his rebellion now had the momentum to push forward. The destruction of their weapon forge had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, and the Federation could no longer ignore the growing tide of insurrection. In the months that followed, humanity's name was spoken in hushed tones by both allies and enemies alike. But with victory came consequences, ones Elias hadn't fully anticipated. The rebellion was expanding rapidly, drawing in forces and resources from all corners of human-controlled space. Yet, as Elias's fleet grew, so did the complexities of leadership. His once tightly knit group of loyalists was now a sprawling, often chaotic organization, filled with different factions, some eager for justice, others for power. Elias found himself facing a new kind of war, a war within. It wasn't just about military strategy anymore. It was about holding together a fragile coalition of diverse groups, each with their own agendas. And not everyone in his ranks was as committed to his original vision of unity and vengeance. The longer he led, the more fractured his rebellion became. Some factions were pushing for more extreme measures, while others, like the refugees and displaced civilians, only wanted peace and a return to their homes. The weight of leadership grew heavier with every passing day. He had once been a captain, a man focused solely on victory in battle. Now he was a ruler, a commander of a force that could no longer be contained by any one ship. It was no longer just about taking revenge on the Auxiliary or the Federation. It was about building a new order. As the rebellion's leader, Elias had to make decisions that weighed heavily on his conscience. He began to realize that the price of freedom wasn't just paid in blood, it was paid in compromises. One such compromise came when a group of dissidents within his own ranks, led by an ambitious commander named Ariatol, launched an attack on a Federation research facility that was critical to the rebellion's plans. Aria's goal wasn't simply to strike the Federation. It was to seize the technology stored there for herself. She believed that by holding the research facility, she could bargain for a stronger position within the rebellion. Elias had trusted Aria once, but now she was playing a dangerous game of her own, and Elias had no choice but to confront her. The rebellion was on the brink of total war, and the last thing he needed was infighting that could fracture everything they had worked for. He made the call. "Commander Toll," Elias said into the secure comms, his voice cold but firm. "You've crossed a line. Stand down. Now." There was a long pause before Aria's voice crackled back, defiant and sharp. "You've lost your edge, Elias. You were once a man of conviction, of fire. Now you're just a politician. The rebellion needs strength, not ideals, and I'll give it to them, whether you like it or not." Elias's jaw clenched as he made his decision. "If you continue this path, you'll be treated as an enemy. I'll destroy the facility if I have to. Your war is over." For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, the voice of his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah DeLuca, came through. "Sir, the situation's escalating. If we don't act fast, we'll lose more than just the facility. We'll lose our control over the fleet." Elias's mind raced. He could feel the rebellion slipping through his fingers, the fragile alliance he had forged teetering on the edge of collapse. But this wasn't just about power, it was about principle. He had to stand by the values that had started this revolution. He gave the order. The Nemesis moved into position, its vast weaponry trained on the facility. The final choice was his, and in that moment, Elias felt the full weight of leadership press down on him. A voice, a whisper of doubt, lingered in his mind. Was this really the path to freedom? Or was it the first step down a dark road? The blast hit the facility with catastrophic force, sending shockwaves across the surrounding system. The technology stored within the research complex was obliterated, and with it, Aria's power. Her forces, scattered and broken, retreated into the depths of the rebellion's growing ranks. It was a victory, but one that tasted bitter. Elias had won, but the cost was steep. As the fleet moved on, Elias found himself standing on the bridge of the Nemesis, staring out into the cold expanse of space. The stars twinkled mockingly at him, distant and indifferent. He had taken another step toward his ultimate goal of revenge. But the price of that victory was now clear. It wasn't just blood. It was trust. It was loyalty. It was the soul of his rebellion. And Elias Cade wasn't sure how much longer he could pay that price. The rebellion had fractured. Elias Cade felt it deep in his bones, the subtle shift in the tides of loyalty. Ariatoll's betrayal was not the first, nor would it be the last, but it had been the most painful. The rebellion that had once been united in purpose now teetered on the brink of civil war. The victory at Sinosaya and the destruction of the Federation facility had emboldened Elias, but it had also set a dangerous precedent. His choices were no longer just about survival. They were about the soul of the movement he had begun. Months passed, and Elias's rebellion continued to grow in both size and complexity. With new recruits came new factions, each with its own set of ideals and goals. Some were motivated by revenge, others by the desire for power, and still others by the need to restore humanity's rightful place in the galaxy. And amid the chaos, there were those who saw Elias Cade not as a hero, but as a symbol, an icon to be revered or destroyed. On the command bridge of the Nemesis, Elias stood alone, staring at the stars. The flickering holographic display in front of him showed the map of human-controlled space, dotted with planets and outposts. Every piece of information seemed to weigh heavily on him, each decision pulling him deeper into the darkness of leadership. It wasn't just the rebellion that was fractured, it was his mind. The lines between right and wrong had blurred. His once clear vision of justice had grown muddled by the harsh realities of war. The Federation, the Exilari, and now even his own people, all of them were forcing him to choose between principles and pragmatism. Each time he made a decision, a part of him died. And each victory, no matter how significant, felt more hollow than the last. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Commander Cade, there's someone you need to see." Elias turned to face Lieutenant Sarah DeLuca, her face etched with concern. She had been by his side from the very beginning of the rebellion, a constant anchor in the storm. But even she seemed different now, tired, haunted by the weight of everything they had done. "Who is it?" Elias asked, his voice tight with exhaustion. "A former ally," Sarah said softly, glancing over her shoulder as if the very mention of the person's name might summon them from the shadows. "Someone from your past. Someone who might hold the key to ending this." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" She hesitated before answering. "Admiral Holt." The name sent a shudder through Elias. Varen Holt, the man who had once been his mentor, his friend. The man who had betrayed him to the Exilari all those years ago. The man who had sent him into exile, alone and forgotten. Elias felt a flicker of anger rise within him, quickly extinguished by a wave of uncertainty. Holt had been a pillar of the Federation's military, a symbol of order and discipline. His betrayal had shattered Elias's trust in everything he had believed in. But now Sarah was telling him that Holt might be the key to ending this war. "Why now?" Elias asked, his voice a low growl. "Why does he want to speak to me after everything he's done?" Sarah's expression was grave. "We don't know, but he's been making contact from a hidden location in the Phantos system. He says he has information that could change the course of this rebellion. If we want to survive this, we may need to listen." Elias clenched his fists, the tension in his body palpable. The thought of facing Holt again stirred a deep well of emotion within him. Betrayal, anger, and a painful longing for a time before everything had gone wrong. But a part of him knew that if Holt truly had a way to turn the tide, he couldn't afford to ignore it. The decision gnawed at Elias. Could he trust the man who had abandoned him? Could he put aside his hatred for the greater good? Or was this just another trap? Another attempt to break him down, to divide him further? He took a deep breath, pushing aside his inner turmoil. Prepare a shuttle. I'm going to see him. Sarah nodded, her face unreadable. Are you sure about this, sir? No, Elias admitted, his voice low. But I don't have a choice. Minutes later, Elias boarded the shuttle, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. The nemesis loomed behind him, a silent sentinel as he departed. As the shuttle powered up and broke through the atmosphere, Elias's gaze lingered on the stars. For the first time in a long while, he felt like a man walking toward something that might not be victory. It might be an end. His end, or the end of everything he had fought for. But one thing was certain. He was no longer the man who had been betrayed. He was the Forsaken brother, and whatever awaited him on Phantos, he would face it with the same unrelenting resolve that had carried him this far. The journey to the Phantos system was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging in Elias's mind. The stars outside the shuttle's viewport were distant, cold, and indifferent, just as they had always been. The nemesis was far behind, its massive hull now a mere dot in the distance. The rebellion, the war, the very future of humanity. All of it felt distant now. Everything hinged on this meeting, and Elias couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that he was walking straight into a trap. As the shuttle approached Phantos IV, the world at the heart of Holt's message, a sense of foreboding settled over Elias. Phantos was a barren, desolate world, its surface covered with jagged cliffs and long-abandoned mining colonies. The perfect hiding place for someone like Holt, someone who needed to stay hidden from both the Xelari and the Federation's prying eyes. The shuttle's engines thrummed, cutting through the silence, as it descended toward the designated landing site. The spaceport was abandoned, the lights flickering intermittently, casting an eerie glow over the broken infrastructure. The only sign of life was a solitary figure standing at the center of the landing pad, silhouetted by the dying light of the twin suns hanging low in the sky. It was him, Admiral Varen Holt. Elias's heart thudded painfully in his chest as the shuttle doors opened. He stepped out, his boots crunching on the cracked concrete. Holt, older than Elias remembered, but still carrying the same cold, calculating presence, stood waiting. The Admiral's eyes met Elias's, and for the briefest moment, the world seemed to pause. All the anger, the betrayal, the years of hatred flooded Elias's mind. He wanted to turn away, to leave and never speak to the man again. But something, some deeper instinct, forced him to stay. "You've changed," Holt said, his voice a low rasp, laced with something Elias couldn't quite place, regret. Or perhaps it was just the remnants of old guilt. Elias's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You've got some nerve, Holt. After everything, after you sent me to die, you expect me to listen to you." Holt didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes never leaving Elias's face. "I never wanted you dead, Elias. But I made a choice. And in war, we're all forced to make choices we regret." Elias's voice was a hiss. "Regret doesn't bring the dead back, Holt." "I know," Holt said quietly, "and that's why I've spent every day since trying to fix it. But there's more at stake now than your personal vengeance or the rebellion. The Federation is crumbling, yes, but what comes after will be far worse. There are forces out there, forces that neither you nor I can even begin to comprehend." Elias's anger flared, but he kept it in check. "What do you want, Holt? Why are you here?" The Admiral's eyes darkened. "Because I've seen what's coming. The Xelari aren't the real threat, Elias. They're a distraction. The true enemy lies beyond the borders of this galaxy. And if we don't work together, none of this, your rebellion, the Federation, your vision for humanity, it won't matter. It will all be for nothing." Elias stared at him, his mind spinning. He had always known Holt was a man of secrets, a master of manipulation. But this was beyond anything he had expected. "What are you talking about?" Elias asked, his voice low, disbelief creeping into his words. "The Xilari, the Federation. They're just pawns in a game played by something far older, far more powerful," Holt explained, his tone grim. "I know this because I've been part of their plans for years. They'd been testing humanity's capacity for war, shaping you into a weapon. And now you're the key to something much greater." Elias stepped back, shaking his head. "This is madness. What are you asking me to do? Join you? After everything you've done?" Holt's eyes softened for a brief moment, and Elias saw a flicker of the man who had once been his mentor. "I'm asking you to understand. Humanity was never meant to be a footnote in the galaxy's history. You have the power to change that, Elias. But it won't be through revenge, and it won't be through war. It will be through something else, something that will require all of us to work together." Elias's thoughts churned. The anger, the betrayal, the need for vengeance. It all felt insignificant now. Holt's words lingered in the air like a dark omen. The Federation, the Xilari, they were nothing compared to whatever threat was lurking beyond the stars. "What do we need to do?" Elias asked, the edge in his voice gone. Holt stepped closer, his expression serious. "We need to unite, Elias. To fight something no one in the galaxy is prepared for. And if we don't act now, everything we fought for will be erased. There's a dark force awakening, and it's coming for all of us." Elias felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had known war, betrayal, and vengeance. But this was different. This was something far bigger than him, bigger than the rebellion. It was the beginning of something far darker. Elias's mind was in turmoil. Holt's words had shattered his understanding of the universe, like a cracked mirror reflecting 1,000 different, twisted versions of reality. The Federation, the Xilari, even his rebellion, none of it had ever been the real threat. And now, Elias Cade, the man who had fought for humanity's survival, stood at the precipice of something far larger than he could have ever imagined. "You're telling me that everything we've done, all the blood spilled, was just a prelude?" Elias's voice was a low growl, barely a whisper over the howling wind of Phantos Ivy's dying atmosphere. Holt nodded grimly, his eyes haunted with the weight of the truth. "The galaxy has been dancing to a tune it doesn't understand, Elias. You've been used, just like the rest of us. The Xilari, the Federation. They're all pawns in a far older game. And now, humanity has been chosen to play a part in that game, whether we're ready or not." Elias felt as though the ground beneath him had dissolved. His entire purpose, his rebellion, was it all just a stepping stone to something else? Was this fight for freedom, for revenge, just the opening act in a larger, much darker story? "Who are they?" Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. "This force, what do they want?" "They're called the Tsara," Holt said, the name sending a chill down Elias's spine. "An ancient species, older than the Federation, older than the Xilari. They've been watching us for centuries, studying us, manipulating events from the shadows. The war between the Xilari and the Federation, it was orchestrated by them. Humanity's rise to power, it was all part of their design." Elias took a step back, the weight of Holt's words crashing into him like a tidal wave. The rebellion, his vengeance, it had all been nothing more than a diversion, a game. And now, it seemed as if humanity was meant to play the final hand, whether they understood the rules or not. "What do you mean? They've been watching us. Why hasn't anyone ever heard of them?" Elias demanded. "Because they don't want to be seen," Holt explained, his face grim. "The Tsara operate in the shadows, pulling strings, influencing civilizations from the darkness. They never show themselves, but they're always there. And now they're ready to step into the light. And when they do, it will be a reckoning." Elias's thoughts raced. The Tsara, an ancient species, hidden away in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. The Federation, the Xelari, even his own rebellion, all part of a vast, unknowable plan. What do they want with us? With humanity? Elias asked. They want us to be their weapons, Holt said softly, his voice almost a whisper. Humanity is the key to their ultimate victory. You're stronger than you know, Elias. The Tsara have been studying your genetics, your resilience. They know that humanity has the potential to conquer worlds, to push beyond the limitations of even the most advanced species. Elias's pulse quickened. So, what? They want to use us as soldiers. Holt nodded. More than that. They want to control you, Elias. They want to control humanity, to harness your strength, your adaptability, to break the galaxy in their image. Elias felt his blood run cold. For the first time since this war had begun, he truly understood the magnitude of what they were up against. His rebellion, his war, it was nothing compared to the cosmic scale of the Tsara's designs. But even knowing this, he refused to surrender. No, Elias said firmly, his voice unwavering. I won't let them. No one controls humanity, not while I'm still breathing. A glimmer of something akin to respect flashed in Holt's eyes. I knew you'd say that. But you'll need more than just willpower, Elias. You'll need allies, true, strong allies. And you'll need to unite the fractured rebellion. If you don't, the Tsara will use that division to tear everything apart. Elias's mind began to race again. Holt was right. The rebellion was fractured, broken into countless factions, each with its own ideals and motives. They needed to be united, not just for their survival, but for the survival of everything they had fought for. I'll unite them, Elias said, his voice filled with conviction. I'll unite humanity under one banner. No more infighting. No more betrayal. Holt studied him carefully, as if weighing the sincerity of his words. Then you'll need to move fast. The Tsara are closer than you think, and once they make their move, it will be too late. Elias turned, his gaze falling on the shuttle that had brought him here. The rebellion, his rebellion, had reached its breaking point, but from the ashes of betrayal, of shattered dreams, there would be something new, a force that would not bend to the will of the Tsara. He was no longer the Forsaken brother. He was the Forged King, a leader bound not by the past, but by the unyielding will to create a future where humanity would stand free, no matter the cost. With renewed resolve, Elias Cade turned toward the stars. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. Now it was time to show them exactly what humans were capable of.